on the flower as well. And so I want you to find them on your little lily. Okay, he's not too bad. That looks pretty good. All right, so first thing that I want to talk about is, this is on the lab sheet there.
Can we take them out of the...
You can take them out of the vase, yes.
Oh, they are.
All right, so first thing that I want to talk about is
We'll take the smaller one.
on this little guy here. These little green guys right here. You can see one here. I've got a couple here in the back. This little green guy right there. That little green guy right there. All collectively, those are called sepals. Those are called sepals. The sepals are actually going to protect and enclose the developing bud. So think roses, okay? So think of roses that are still enclosed in those little green leaf-like structures. Those are called sepals. So they protect the developing bud. Now I want you to notice, do you find any green sepals on your lilies?
No.
No, you don't. Okay? They're not there. All right, so listen. I do want you to notice that you do have three things that look like petals on the very outside, right? Okay? Grab me one there. All right, I want you to look at these. You should have three on the outside, right? Those are the sepals. They are modified sepals. They're colors. Okay? So what do you think the job of the sepals of this particular flower is?
Protection.
Attract pollinators. Okay? So here's my little lily. He would be closed up. And these little sepals, those first three that you see on the outside, these just happen to be colored sepals. On this model, they're green. Okay? Hopefully when we come back from spring break, I can bring you some hibiscus flowers that actually you will see some green sepals on them, okay? So I'll kind of bring in a little bit of a different, and Mrs. Schumacher will do the same thing as well. So right now, this is kind of all we have because, things aren't looking so good in the garden. So we'll bring, hopefully by spring break, we'll have a few hibiscus that are opening up on my plants, and I'll bring some in. Okay?
So the sepals wrap around the actual
They
petals?
enclose, yep.
Okay.
These just happen to be colored
Okay.
because they're modified for attracting pollinators. But some of them are green. Okay. All right, then of course we have the petals, right? Here are the petals. These are the petals. The true petals of this lily are the inner three that you see there. And they have the little lines, little brown lines. All right, so what does the color do? The color does what?
Attracts pollinators.
Attracts a pollinator. What do you think the function of those little brown lines are?
Like a
Like a
guide.
guide
It's a
down.
landing pad. It's like lights on the runway at an airport. They're going to direct whatever comes down in there to say, hey, here's where the nectar is. Come get a little drop of nectar, take some of my pollen with you, and move on to the next flower and cross-pollinate for me. Okay? Any questions? All right, function of the petals are to attract the pollinators. Then we have the male reproductive parts of the flower, which are called the stamens. Here are the stamens right here. These three guys here are stamens. Okay?
So that would be the...
So when you look at your little flower, you're going to see the ones that have the little nubby ends. And when you flick them, you'll see that pollen comes off of them. There's two parts to the stamen. Two parts. The filament, which is the long stalk that simply holds up the part that contains the pollen, which this is the anther. This is where the pollen grains are going to be made. Now, these flowers have kind of been used a little bit, yes.
Which is the stamen?
This whole thing is the stamen. The stamen is made of two parts. Filament, anther. Okay? you should have 6 stamens. Like I said, these flowers have been a bit worn, so the little nubs may be off. Like mine, I see 3 with the nubs, 3 without. I mean, it's okay. As long as you can find one that has the little nub on it, the anther, you're good. And then we have the female part of the flower. The female part of the flower can be called 2 things. It can be called the carpel or the pistil. It's this thing here in the center. Okay? Now, like I said, these flowers are a bit kind of used. They've been used for a couple of days now. So some of the stuff is kind of drying up a little bit. So I'm going to come around and I'm going to show you the pistil. This is the only flower that I could find a really good pistil because the pistil has all right, so here's kind of what you're looking at. And it's hard to, these are not the best because they're kind of drying up a little bit. But this is what we have. All right, so look. Here and there. That's your stamens, right? There's your filament, there's your anther. There is a little stalk that should be kind of coming up out of the center that might be a tad shorter, but it has these 3 prongs on it like that. That's the pistil. Okay, but most of them are drying up. So I'm going to come around, I'm going to show you the pistil from these flowers right here, okay? Make sure y'all, make sure we can see a pistil. You see how that has 3 little nubs on it? 3 prongs right there. That's the pistil. All right. So here's a good pistil. See how it has 3 prongs on it? Thing I'm pushing down on my probe. That thing right there? That's a pistil.
Yeah, this one doesn't have any. Well, you can't see it.
¿Este es la pista? Yeah, pista. ¿Te abres o te abro?
Y'all might have them.
Yeah, this one has it.
Oh yeah, it does. That one has it.
I don't know.
Bracken and Iris, I feel so stupid because like, what happened to your finger? And I'm like,
A lot of these are kind of swirling up.
I need to cut my nails. I'm getting long.
Which one was it?
Want me to hold it?
It's okay. You can't even see it.
Can't you focus your camera?
I can if I zoom it in and out.
Where is it? It's right here.
Focus.
Put it on the
All right,
blackout.
so the pistil has 3 parts. The little part that has the little 3 prongs on it is typically going to be sticky.
Hasta quiere ser
The
focus.
hibiscus has a really good one. You can actually cut the big lilies. You have the big Stargaze lilies that are the real fragrant ones. They have a really good stigma that's very sticky. Okay, so the stigma is the tip of the pistil, and that's where the pollen is going to attach. So the stigma is typically going to be sticky, so the pollen will stick and stay where it's supposed to be, right?
makes sense.
Then the pollen grain, when he lands, remember about fertilization way back when we were talking about this at the beginning, looking at some of these slides. Remember that one of those, there's going to be 2 cells, the tube nucleus and the generative nucleus. Remember the tube nucleus makes the pollen tube. It's going to dig its way down the long structure here of the pistil that's called the style. And then that generative nucleus is going to split into 2 sperm. And when it gets down here to the swollen part, this is the ovary. This is the ovary right here. And it's going to go to the ovule. Remember, the ovules are hanging around in here. These are the ovules right in here. Okay? When it gets into the ovule, One of those sperm cells is going to fertilize the egg and we're going to get the zygote. The other sperm cell is going to fertilize the things called the polar nuclei, and it's going to make the endosperm, which is like the nutrition tissue for the developing embryo. So remember we call that double fertilization, right? We're going to talk about this next time in lecture after spring break. But the three main parts of the pistil are the stigma, style, and ovary. Got it? All right, so let's look at a couple of other terminologies here. Monocot flowers versus dicot flowers. If you are a monocot flower, your flower parts are going to be in groups of 3 or multiples of 3. If you're a dicot, your flower parts are going to be in multiples of 4 or 5. So look at your lilies and let's look at the petals. That's the easiest thing to look at that's still intact. What groupings or multiples are our petals in?
Monica.
A group of
3.
3. So that makes those lilies a monocot. You could also look at the leaves and the venation on the leaves, correct? What are the venation? What's the pattern of venation on those leaves? Parallel. So that'll let you know it's a monocot, right? All right, in the back, Mrs. Schumacher brought this in. So again, our flowers are kind of light right now, so hopefully after spring break we might have a few more. This is a verbena.
No, you're good.
And I'm going to look at one of these little flowers, and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals. If I've got 5 petals, that's a grouping of 5 or a multiple of 5. It's just 5 at this point. What is my verbena? Is it a monocot or a dicot?
Dicot.
It's a dicot. Now, you can look at the leaves and notice that the leaves have that palmate venation. Any kind of netted venation will also tell you that it's a dicot. Okay?
So it could be palmate or pinnate for
Any netted venation, whether it's pinnate or palmate, indicates a dicot. But in this case, we're looking at flower parts in particular. I was just trying to review you on the monocot, dicot. Flower parts is what we're looking at here. So if there's 4 or 5 sepals, you've got a dicot. Or groupings of 4 and 5, it's a dicot. Any groupings of 3 for petals, sepals, stamens, that's going to be a monocot. Okay? Now, I went over with you kind of the 4 main parts of a flower. You've got sepals, you've got petals, you've got stamens, and you have a pistil. If you have all of that, all 4 of those groupings, you're called a complete flower. So look at your lilies that you have. Would those be a complete flower? Yes, they would. Even though my sepals are colored, they're not green, it still has sepals, petals, pistil, and stamens. It's complete. If the flower was missing one of those 4 parts, we would call it an incomplete flower. Okay? An incomplete flower. Alright? We don't have any examples of incomplete flowers right here, okay? We'll talk more about those when we get into flowers in lecture. I'll kind of show you some pictures of those. Alright? Alright, we can also classify flowers on whether they are perfect or imperfect. If you are a perfect flower, you're going to have both male and female parts on the same plant. So are your lilies perfect?
Yes.
Or are they imperfect? They're perfect. Now another term to describe the fact that you've got both male and female parts on the same flower is monoecious. So your flowers are perfect and they're also monoecious. Monoecious means you've got both reproductive parts on the same flower.
So monoecious and perfect mean the same thing.
When we talk about flowers, yes. But this question was brought up in the first lab. So it seems a bit redundant. But pine trees. Pine trees outside in the students' area over here in the quad area, those are monoecious. But that means you've got both male cones, which are their own structure, and female cones, which are their own structure on the same plant. So monoecious is kind of a little bit more of a little more general.
Okay.
Perfect and imperfect is only used when we talk about flowers. Okay?
Okay.
So, are all complete flowers perfect?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have to have a.
It's not a trick question. Okay? Yes, they have all four parts.
Monoecious means you have
Petal sepals, male, female, makes a complete flower. So all complete flowers are perfect. Are all perfect flowers complete?
No.
They don't have to be. They could be missing petals or they could be missing sepals. But as long as they got male and female parts, you're perfect. Right? Well, in the case of flowers, you're perfect. Humans, not so much. But in flowers, you're perfect. Got it? Some plants, like a lot of our fruit trees, have male and female trees. Male flowers on one tree, female flowers on the other tree. So if you want to make fruit, guess what? You got to plant both, right? So in that case, if you've got a tree that has female flowers and a tree that has male flowers, what do we call it now? We don't call it monoecious, we call it dioecious. Dioecious means two houses. You got a house for the male parts and you got a house for the female parts. Got it? Alright, symmetry is the last thing on there. We can look at flowers and we can classify them based on symmetry. Look at your lilies. And it's the same kind of symmetry that we talk about classifying animals with. Bilateral or radial. Look at your lilies. What kind of symmetry do you think they have? Do they have bilateral or do they have radial?
Bilateral.
Radial. Okay? The parts of the flower are arranged like spokes on a wheel, just like a jellyfish. Okay, my guys back here, my verbena. These verbena, when you come back here and look at these guys, they are radially symmetrical as well.
So,
Can you think of a bilaterally symmetrical flower?
Could be a bluebonnet.
A blue, that's a very good one. Not the one I was thinking of. Yes, bluebonnets are bilaterally symmetrical. They've got that one little kind of, I'm thinking about my bluebonnets, you don't want to think I've seen those, but they've got the one little kind of cup and then they've got the other one that comes out like this, right? Each little individual part of the flower is bilaterally symmetrical. What's a common one you find on corsages that would be bilaterally symmetrical?
Orchid?
An orchid. Orchids are bilaterally symmetrical. If you take an orchid and you cut that orchid in half, it's got an pretty much equal representation of a left and a right side, just like you would for us. Okay? Any questions? No questions? All right.
all of the other flowers are radial.
Last call on flowers.
So pretty much the most common, like if you see like a typical flower, that's radial.
It's radial.
I would have to probably agree that, yeah, most flowers are radially symmetrical. Orchids, you know, most are, yes. Probably. I'm thinking of the ones I'm planting in my yard right now, though. Yeah.
In general.
In general.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd probably say it's more commonly radially symmetrical than bilaterally symmetrical. All right, any questions on fruits? Flowers.
Yes, one. Imperfect, it just means that you're missing something.
You're
right?
missing male or female parts. Incomplete means you're missing male, female, petals, or sepals. One or more of those things.
So, but the
Okay.
imperfect means you're missing like
Reproductive.
reproductive parts.
Because it has to be. Yeah.
One of the reproductive parts is perfect and imperfect. Is referring to reproductive parts. All right, so fertilization happens down here in the ovary. remember